Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Derry Girls, Season 3, Episode 4. In this episode, we have a lot of people talking about death, trying to speak to or avoid the dead, and having close encounters of their own with really, really surprising results. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode, and also thank you, Ashleigh, for coming here on your birthday to hang out. I have a cold, and Ashleigh is here saying, Lucozade is amazing. You can feel the electrolytes. Worth trying if you're feeling low energy. I have got to be honest, I'm not sure we have that here. I've never heard that name before, Lucozade. Is it like Gatorade, I'm assuming, or maybe like that emergency? But regardless, yeah, if I sound kind of weird, that's probably what it is, because I'm a little bit stuffed up. It's not too bad. So I decided to go ahead and record anyway, but it's there. So, yeah, this episode was just like, it was kind of interesting to me how I hadn't really noticed all that much the parallels that they often write into what's going on with the adults and what's going on with the kids. And I haven't gone and looked at the other episodes in previous seasons to really like suss out how consistent this is throughout, or if this is something they've been doing a little bit more this season. But when I stopped to think about it, like, we have this whole thing with so we're in the 4th episode. Previous episode was the one with the trip to the beach, right? Episode before that was 3 was the trip to the beach. Episode 2 was the talent show, right? And 1 was breaking into the school after hours. The episode where they break into the school, they're doing something illegal and trying to keep it secret. Have a whole thing where they get questioned by the cops, yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, the adults are dealing with an animal that has, like, killed somebody else's pet, and they're trying to cover that up, and one of them gets questioned, and they are also, like, doing something similarly shady, but just, it's very low stakes because it's pets, but it still sort of feels like a bit of a criminal activity in its way. It's just kind of silly. It's not actual crime. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't really stop and think about that. Then when we have the, and I'm forgetting what the parallel adult storyline is for the talent show episode, but in the episode where they're going to the seaside, the kids are going to, they've forgotten one of their friends and left her behind. And the adults have literally forgotten a friend that is standing in front of them, and they cannot remember who she is. And so there's it's a very one-to-one there as well. And then this episode was the one where it really caught my attention because it's so obvious that both groups are dealing with their, like, weird feelings about people who have died and the ways that they each, like, kind of are encountering that. And the adults, it's somebody that they know and somebody that they personally miss. And with the kids, it's them being in the house of somebody they don't know very well. They've been sort of sent to do it. They're there for their own reasons. And then, you know, this, like, weird haunted feeling that they're, and then of course we have the whole thing with James. So talent show is the affair. I'm wondering, like, there's not really a parallel there, I guess, unless you could say like her just desire to do something different and break out of the rut that she was in, feeling like she was managing everybody, because the girls are doing something that they hadn't intended to really do while they, when they were told what the talent show was going to be, none of them were very interested until Michelle hears that there's going to be like the prize of participating on television, and then she's all about it. So I don't know, maybe that one, it doesn't work as well, but I just thought it was interesting once I got to this one, when I thought back and I was like, I guess they kind of go together, huh? But yeah, this episode starts off again with these two fucking girls performing a song. And it turns out, because Michelle is getting very angry as she's watching them perform. And I was not sure if it was because they were like kind of insulting her in a way that we would find out about later. It felt like she was taking it very personally. And as we find out later, the girls wrote this song. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't know if they mean that they wrote the song, or if they wrote alternate lyrics to the song that went with the theme that they were supposed to be writing about, which was their faith, apparently. This song isn't one that I recognize. So if it's just that they wrote new lyrics to it, forgive me for not recognizing it. But I do find it really amusing how often these two are showcased on this show as being particularly just embarrassing. Like, everybody dislikes them and feels extremely weird, like, about the way they're putting themselves out there over and over again. And I really want to know how they keep winding up in the position to do this. Like, we know that Sister Michael is not into it. I imagine Sister Michael is not really in charge of these like morning assembly setups. She strikes me as the kind of person who delegates most things. And I admire that, to be perfectly honest. So I imagine that there's another teacher who lets them do this, but we never really see what I am used to when we have a show that's like set in a high school and there are a couple of students who are really overachievers or just kind of goody two-shoes. Usually what we see is how the teachers, or at least one particular teacher, seems to favor them over others because of the fact that they are sucking up all the time. And what I think is sort of interesting about these two is that we don't ever really see anybody who's like charmed by this. Certainly not Sister Michael. In the couple episodes before, when they're, up on the stage dancing to that like Caribbean music, which is puzzling, one of the teachers gets sort of roped into standing up and dancing with them. And she's obviously just wants to be literally anywhere else. So I just think it's kind of funny that nobody seems to like this. And these girls genuinely do not give a fuck. They just are here to do what they're going to do. And while a part of me is deeply embarrassed for them, another part of me just sort of envies how freeing it must be to have that kind of lack of self-awareness. Can you imagine? Like, how many more things would we all have accomplished in our lives if we weren't constantly obsessing over the way it would be received? I mean, are they good? No. Do I wish somebody would tell them, we're not doing this week? No. A little. Do I really envy the fact that they are doing something just for the sake of the enjoyment that it gives them? A little bit. So anyway, Ashleigh's saying, I think it's because they're the only ones volunteering. And also, Jenny's family is supposed to be really rich, so I can see them being on the school board and the girls have to be shown favor as a result. That's interesting. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that I don't really know, even in the United States, how it works to be on, like, the Board of Education. So I won't speak to that. I have no idea if there have ever been kids that I went to school with whose parents were on the Board of Education and I just wasn't aware of it. No idea. But, interesting theory. It would make some sense, too, because how many times are... I mean, there's a lot of episodes to start off with these two. I can't get over the fucking, like, cowboy hats. Oh, my God. It's just so awkward. So anyway, Michelle is listening. And she suddenly sits up and she says, "That sly bitch." We get opening credits very briefly. And then we go to the girls all in Sister Michael's office. And I love that they're here to report a crime. And she interrupts and says being really, really bad at something isn't actually a crime. And they explain when they went on that retreat with Father Peter, he asked us to write something about faith. Thank Christ I had pneumonia that weekend. We wrote that song, sister, and Jenny stole it. And it gets interrupted here. This is interesting to me because it really seems like this is going to be the point of the episode, right? No. Jenny stealing this song is incidental to everything else. The only reason that this is in here, as far as I know of right now, for all I know, it comes up again the next episode. But as of now, it's only to get them in the office at the moment when Sister Michael gets this phone call so that they happen to be right there in the line of fire. And she gets this call and she says, "Oh, really? Well, of course, leave it to me." She hangs the phone up and Claire says, "Is everything all right?" And she says, "My aunt just died." And I love when James says, "We're so sorry, sister." And she says, "Don't be, girls." There's just something about how nobody, including me as the host, acknowledges James as not being female when I talk about this group. I talk about them as the girls. And anytime he tries to say he's a boy, everybody who's like he's speaking to in that moment just seems very uninterested. And here Michael, Sister Michael's like responding to him, but says girls. I just love that. She had been ill for a very, very long time. And also she was an absolute arsehole. So Aaron says, "Well, if there's anything we can do." And I love this moment because it reminds me a little bit of, there's a moment in, I think it's the beginning of Clash of Kings when Tyrion has been taken captive by Catelyn and they are riding up into the mountains of the Eyrie and it's freezing fucking cold. And one of the men who has captured him is trying to be chivalrous and asks if Tyrion would like his cloak. And Tyrion says, "Yes, I would. Thank you so much for offering. That's really appreciated." And of course, this guy is not intending to give up his cloak. So the fact that Tyrion accepts is like, now what do? You can either be like, "I have no intention of doing that," and make it very clear that you were just saying some shit and have nothing, your words don't mean anything. Or you hand it over and try and behave as if this was what you had intended the whole time. And Tyrion is just snickering to himself about how clearly this man just said something in the moment that he thought wouldn't be accepted. And surprise, it was. And this is some energy that I fucking adore, is just deciding you put it out there. So I'm gonna take you at your word. if you didn't intend it, you shouldn't have said it. And yes, I fully am aware you didn't intend it, but that's your problem, not mine, my friend. I love this. So what Sister Michael does, I forgot Austin Ashleigh is here. He says it was book 1, Game of Thrones. Thank you, Austin. I said Austin Ashleigh, Austin Armenio. Sorry, Austin Ashleigh is my other friend named Austin, who named a woman named Ashleigh. So her name is Ashleigh. I will never get over that in the rest of my life. I just won't. Anyway, so when Aaron says, if there's anything we can do, Sister Michael stops and looks at her and then says, the hospice wants to release the body, but the house is a tip. The woman was a desperate hoarder. I doubt we'd fit the coffin in. Once you pass the border. And then she starts writing on this map where they need to go and circles the town and everything. And the girls are, of course, taken very aback. And Aaron is like, you want us to go and clean your dead aunt's house? Well, interestingly, Claire starts to be like, I don't think that this is appropriate at all. And Michelle has to step in and be like, Claire, I can't believe that you would be so rude in this hour of need that the sister is being so vulnerable as to display to us, that you would just callously refuse to help. And considering that we would be all alone in the house with no adults all evening, this probably would be too much for her. And it's only right that we take this on. I love this so much. Michelle is out here with the right idea. And it did not occur to me that she would be down for this. But once she outlines the reasons for this, I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. So they are given the keys to the school van. And now that James is able to drive, he is going to be in charge of their little journey. And they drive. There's a checkpoint at one point. And they had all there's a lovely little bit where they're talking about what they're going to do. And Michelle is saying, obviously, there are lots of hot farmers. And I'd totally fucking forgotten that Claire came out to them last season. Just clean slipped my mind. So Claire is like, well, great. What the fuck? What about me? And Michelle is like, obviously there are lesbian farmers. Definitely. There's going to be an option for you. I really love Claire's face when she says this. Lesbian farmers? Really? Lesbian farming is actually huge in the Republic. We'll got you sorted. Don't worry. And I know for a fact there are 2 communities that have been taking over farming in the United States. One is the lesbian community. More so it's like the gay community, but lesbians are sort of at the forefront of that. And the black community has been getting a lot more into farming than they had been. And that's not to say that they weren't to begin with, because there were a lot of black farmers, but it's sort of becoming there's a push to turn the farming into a sort of business that is different than what farming used to be, which was to sell wholesale to retailers and things like that. So people are trying to turn it into smaller family owned businesses. But anyway, just this moment where she's talking about how there's definitely going to be lesbian farmers. I was like, I don't know if this was really true when Michelle said it, but I have no doubt this shit would be quite true now. And then James is like, so what about me? Could we pick you up a girl? Could we pick me up a girl? And Michelle is like, what? You pick you up a girl? And Aaron says, like she's a thing? And Orla from inside the car, that is so out of order, James. I didn't mean, I just thought, you thought wrong, James. Sorry. Dirtbag. Oh my God. I don't know like what I expected here, but anytime that they rag on him, I expect there are so many times where in comedies it's accepted that there's one character that's going to get ragged on, and to a degree it's really like upsetting sometimes to watch, or really just frustrating, or you feel kind of sad. And I think that there's a really genius take on this in Parks and Rec, where the character that they do this with is Gary Gergich, Jerry Gangrich, whatever. And he, at the end of the series, like in later seasons, it is revealed that he has this incredibly hot wife and like 4 absolutely stunning model-like daughters, and that they live this idyllic life in a big, rambling, beautiful home, and that he has like the biggest dick that his doctor has ever seen. And all of these things, like he is living this flawless life, and yet everybody dunks on him and nobody takes him seriously. And he accepts that's his role in the group and knows that it's not reasonable and doesn't really take any of it that personally. He just goes with it because he gets it, that there has to be a guy like that, and he's the guy, and it's fine, you know? And so they managed to sort of undercut that. In this show, what I feel like could have wound up being kind of like saddening about James's role in everything, they've picked an actor who is very good at selling being upset for a moment and then immediately letting it roll off him. He's just he has just enough of a sort of pitiful aspect that you buy that his feelings are hurt and that he's annoyed, or, you know, that they got to him. But then he recovers so quickly and moves on to whatever mayhem they're planning that you are willing to let it go if he's willing to let it go. And in moments like this, he's not even like, well, you guys were all talking, so why can't I talk? It's like, when they all give him this look, he isn't even trying to argue his own case anymore. He's just like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm not allowed. And I misspoke because I thought it was the thing we were all going to get to do. Didn't realize I don't get to. And I immediately acknowledge I don't get to. And I fucked up. And you're right. Which is just so interesting. You know, it's not like he feels like this, he has been wronged. It is him immediately realizing that he screwed up, didn't really get the vibe, and now he is on board. Can we move on so that we can forget my mistake here, please? So anyway, I just really enjoy James. The actor that they picked, I feel like, is really good for this. And the way the script is written is really good for it. So they're getting all ready for this trip. And then we go back to the house and we find out that it has been 10 years to the day since Mary and Sarah's mother died. And they're bringing some wreaths to her grave, and they are also going to go speak to a psychic who apparently can commune with the dead and see if they can get a message from their mother. I love this when they're talking about her gravesite, because he apparently leaves like flowers there. There is a woman's grave right next to hers, and nobody evidently like comes to visit it. And their father says that it's like a jungle over there, and that he's wondering whether it would be okay for him to like trim the grass over that grave. And Sarah says something about how it's really inappropriate because they're making it sort of sound like it's a sexual thing. And it's a wild moment where I'm just immediately, my thought was like, yeah, you should go ahead. And then when Sarah's like, that's not appropriate, I was suddenly like, oh, maybe it's not appropriate. Maybe I'm being like kind of thoughtless and just thinking, I'm sure whoever who's ever left that is related to that person would appreciate it, maybe they would see it as kind of invasive and like, well, whose business is it? Like, you don't get to do this. And it never really occurred to me, but I do kind of wonder what the etiquette is on that. Like the cemeteries in the US, mostly what they do is just have people who go around and trim everything. And so the grass is always cut by a riding mower or one of those bigger ones that you sort of drag, depending on how big the space is. But I would imagine if you're in like Europe, where space is at much more of a premium, everything is smaller over there. Homes are closer together and rooms are smaller. Everything is smaller. I have to imagine that cemeteries have to be a lot tighter. So maybe that is something that like everybody individually has to take care of, or at least in certain places. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting because I had no issue with it. And then when Sarah said that, I started second guessing myself completely. And I love this, that Joe is just like, I can't believe that it's been 10 years and we haven't heard from her. And Jerry is like, maybe because she's dead. And Joe is just like, she couldn't just move a coffee cup or something. And eventually I would give anything to speak to her again. And they think that's really touching because they think it's just affection. And he's like, I would give anything to know what she did with my good electric razor. Which this is always the stuff that I sort of think about regarding like minor inconveniences. You lose somebody who is hugely important in your life. Your entire life shifts and changes in massive, like ways that change the actual terrain of every day that you live in. And that is certainly real. But then imagine all of the little things, shit that they took care of that you didn't even really know was a thing, because it wasn't big enough for them to sit down and talk to you about it. But it was enough that if it doesn't get done, it's an issue and you just didn't notice, or they put something somewhere, or maybe they invited people over for some future thing and they like meant to tell you, or accepted an invitation on your behalf to be somewhere and didn't, even something as simple as like the passwords on certain accounts. And it all went to their email, which you don't know the password to either. So you can't get back into your Netflix account once you get signed out. Like all of this stuff, I always think about it and how much of a fucking hassle it would be. Ashley's in the chat saying, I know my mom would be really upset if someone would do so. We have a graveyard caretaker, but he looks after the general grassy areas and whatnot. You look after your own graves. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, personally, if somebody were to like mow my dad's grave, if it were unkempt, I would be fine with it. But I understand like people being territorial about it if it's something you're meant to sort of do yourself. It's like there is a fine line when it comes to stuff like that between being helpful and being kind of like passive aggressive and reprimanding someone for not taking care of things the way you think they should take care of things. It's a really tricky thing to figure out what somebody is saying by doing something, if anything. Are they just trying to be helpful? Or are they trying to make a point about the fact that you're not handling your shit? And it's not always easy to tell. Ashley says, yeah, I was watching a show over the weekend with my sister that she was working on, and it really upsets me because the god of death is reaping someone, and they ask for just a moment to give their wife the password for their safe to get their passports as they're on holidays. Ashley, Austin replied with Sandman. Ashley says, yeah, this is the sort of thing that I constantly am telling myself, I need to write something down. I need to put together a set of information that at least Owen can have access to and be able to get into my various accounts for things. And I have never done it. This is like something that I probably should write down for the new year as a goal to have finished by like June, is for both of us to have set up what ifs for our deaths, because you just never know what's going to happen. You truly don't. And death is one of the most disruptive things. It's just wild. So I think about it a lot, but I have never pulled the trigger on it. It's not even like, oh, I don't want to face my own mortality. Frankly, that's the least of it. It's just so much legwork, finding your passwords to everything. Don't you feel tired at just the mere thought? I mean, it's just too goddamn much. It's a lot. It's a lot. So anyway, this is when Mary is saying to Sarah, Bridget Gallagher was telling me about how she went to a psychic, and I love this. Sarah says, well, you know about how I have trouble with my aura. Last time I went to see a psychic, the spirits were coming at me left, right, and center. This one lad, he was in the American Air Force. Well, would he give over about that plane going down? Jesus, he had me demented. And later on, this dude fucking shows up. I am absolutely here for Sarah's weird ghost shit to be completely true. I adore this turn of events. And I didn't get what was going on when she's describing it here. But when we're in that scene later, she says something like, how many times do I have to say that I'm not interested? So it's meant to be that he's romantically interested, I guess. And that is even funnier. What a delightful, weird turn of events. So Ashleigh says, although on another note, they worked on the episode that mostly takes place in the cafe. And she was pointing out, oh, I did that. My friend did that. And I was like, whoa, you might actually be insane. That's intense. I don't know what you're referring to, Ashleigh, unless it's something within the episode that you were referencing of Sandman that I haven't seen. Oh, okay. Got you. So we go, like I had said, they are driving their car over and they get hit at a checkpoint by these soldiers who are looking at their identification, wanting to know why it is that they're coming over. When this dude asks James, are you English? Michelle leans over and says, yeah, he's fine. We didn't bring him up here to kill him or anything. He's my cousin. And he says, oh, right. Not properly English then. And all of the girls start cackling to themselves. Oh, God. And when he says, what's the purpose of your visit? Orla leans out and says, we're going to go ride some farmers. And he says, right, fine, go on. Oh, that was very funny. So we get this overhead shot of them driving, and it's on the coastline, and it's beautiful. It looks like just the first blushes of fall are showing up, And they stop and ask a woman for directions. And she is speaking Irish. And James apparently was not aware that it was its own language, or he just had never heard it before. But he doesn't know what's going on until they explain. And I love when he says, why can't everyone just speak English? Well, your crowd had a good stab at forcing the entire world to, but we didn't really enjoy it much, James, imperialist prick. And I love this because I have seen that fucking gif of her saying that and calling him an imperialist prick. And I was not aware that the new season had come out when I saw that gif, and I was like, wow, I don't remember that scene, but that sounds right. And then turns out it's in the new season, and I hadn't seen it yet, but I just felt like it was so in character that I was willing to believe it had happened. I'd just forgotten it. So when they're asking him, he's asking if any of them can find out from her the directions to the spot on this map, because he's hoping one of them speaks Irish. None of them do, but she starts gesticulating and getting rather panicky. And this woman has a real look to her. She's got no makeup, really sort of sunburned, but also wind-burned face, and white long hair that's loose and pretty wild around her head. And she's wearing very drab clothing with this big apron overall. she looks like she could still be living in like 1920 in this outfit. She could drop into 1920 and nobody would even notice. And so her starting to get pretty intense with what she's saying and how she's gesturing really does feel like a portent of doom. And I keep saying I love this, but I do love this. Erin is saying, I think she said she saw the devil up here, or beware of the devil. It definitely had a devilly vibe. And this turns into a whole like argument about whether that's what she said and that Erin misunderstood. But as we find out later, like that's indeed what she was saying, which is another beautiful payoff to a joke. I love getting weird setups like that and then finding out that there was something to that, you know? Ashleigh in the chat says, what she says in that scene is just, well, friends, how are you? Be careful. I saw the devil himself. Oh, that's amazing. So they take this corner. They are on a rutted road and then they get a flat tire. Claire blames Michelle for talking shit about the devil. And Michelle is like, if there's anyone you want to talk shit about, it is the devil. You get that, right? Then we get this sequence where the car begins rolling because he didn't put the emergency brake on. He asks for them. He's like yelling instructions for them to do it. And they finally manage to pull the brake. But he had been like staring in the wrong direction, and the car hits him in such a way that he gets knocked out for a little bit, and they think he might be dead, and they carry him to the house that they think they're meant to be going to. Claire, who panics when she sees how many potted plants there are when the key is meant to be under a potted plant, immediately just decides that breaking a window is like the thing to do here. And because she's freaking out about the fact that their friend here needs immediate medical attention, and he is, they're stuck outside and God knows where the key is. Personally, yeah, there's a lot of potted plants, but it doesn't take that long to look through them all. I was just kind of like, Claire, most of the time you're panicking in respect to certain things. I kind of understand, but this one I was like, you're really overreacting, my friend. Like, calm down. So they go into the house, and my first thought was, this does not look like a hoarder's house. Are they in the right place? As it turns out, they are not in the right place. I thought this was the TV version of a hoarder's house. Like TV, not reality TV, but like fiction television. Because a hoarder's house, I can imagine, would be pretty hard to film in. Like getting across what the interior of a house like that really looks like, and also staging all of the shots you would need when you're dealing with 5 different characters in the scene. It would be pretty tricky. So if they decided to sort of underplay the hoarderness of it and have it be a little bit neater than that would really be in real life, I wasn't mad about it. But I will say it entered my head. This didn't quite look like what we needed. The only thing that looked right were the plants outside, to be honest. So they get in there. Claire finds out that the phone isn't even connected. So there's no way to get any help to come out here. The car still has its like flat tire. They're talking about who is going to like go back to the village and get help. And then all of a sudden there is this massive crack of thunder and it begins to pour rain. And they're just like, welp, I guess that puts an end to that. Here we are. And we find out that like the electricity is also not working. It's not just the phone. So this all turns out to make sense because of what we find out later. There are new people moving in. So yeah, shit hasn't been hooked up or anything yet. But in the moment, I was sort of like, did they turned it off because she was in the hospice for so long? Maybe like it did seem a little unusual. All of this didn't quite feel like it was adding up, but I was willing to let it slide for the sake of the plot. And then once you get like the explanation later, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I thought that didn't really make sense, but there it is. So James comes to, I love that they're all lamenting that he is dead and he's calling to them and he isn't, like, they're not processing what the fuck has happened. And when they are asking him if he's okay, he begins to talk about how he saw the tunnel and he looks really like emotional about it. He says the tunnel was made of trees, hundreds of trees that had overgrown and entwined. And I could just about make out a light in the distance and a voice as if from nowhere that said, "Walk toward the light." And they all sort of stop as they're watching him like tell this story. And then all of a sudden, Michelle says, I'm really fucking hungry. And they just walk away from him talking about what they're going to find in the kitchen and leave him there after he has shared this like kind of traumatic life-changing moment. And they don't care. They truly don't care at all. So we go back to Derry. Y'all, it's Vares. Vares is our Carlos Santini. And I am absolutely fucking here for this. He is in this outfit. He steps outside for a smoke. He is wearing a pair of green trousers that are held up by a green scarf, which looks to be kind of an issue later on. A very yellow collared shirt with like a red smoking jacket type thing pulled over it. A chain with a medallion around his neck and a sort of like wrap around his hair, like the kind of protective scarf that women of color wear to sleep. And the whole look is of it works for me quite well because you could say this is the look of somebody who's trying to project an aura of mystery or at least eccentricity. Or you could look at this and say, this is a gay man who just wants to look particularly fabulous and this is how he does it. And either of them feels like they absolutely fit. Like, this is not an individual for whom it would surprise me to hear that he had been walking around in the grocery store dressed like this. I would buy he wears this outfit every day, all the time, like that he always dresses like this. And I would believe it. Some people, they put things on and it feels like a very clear costume. They're doing a bit. They're milking the people that come to them by pretending to be someone. And I don't think that's it with him. He just seems to be this actual guy. So jumping back and forth, we go back to the house and we find Annie and Robert, the photo of this like couple that had got married and the death notice of Robert. And they are all getting themselves spooked out because they're here by candlelight, no electricity in the house, thunderstorm going on. They know, so they think that the owner of this home is dead. There's just a lot of weirdness about the like circumstances that leads to all of them starting to kind of get a little bit like jumpy. And at one point, Michelle had said that she was really bored. So she has gone into the other room and written with lipstick on the mirror, "Leave this place." And so when they go in there, everybody freaks the fuck out. But as we discover, none of what they think is going on is real here. So back in Derry, they're sitting around this table. He is trying to tell them to open their hearts and let go of their skepticism, and that it will cost £7.50 for each of them. Which I don't know how much that is in today's money, but I'm going to go ahead and say it's £30 for everyone altogether. This was 20 years ago. So I'm going to say this is around $50 today's money, like $50. I'm translating it to American money, which, that's no small amount of money. So that is understandable why Jerry is just like, are you fucking kidding? And also, no, we're not coming back. So he gets first. There's a man here with dark hair, initial S, and he says, oh, he's with the military. He's American. He's wearing a uniform. And all of a sudden, Sarah is just like, Christ, are you kidding me? And I just got so, like, you should have seen my face as I realized what was going on. It was the last thing I expected, making me very happy, though, because I wanted this guy to be kind of for real. I really did. It's funny to have somebody who's a clear con, but I do enjoy having a drop of, like, mysticism or not really sure what's going on. So yeah, that for me, this was really, really satisfying. So he sees a woman and he's like, oh, she has a message for you. And then all of a sudden he gets interrupted by his mother, who wants to know where her green scarf is. And I love her just being like, if you've taken that scarf again, you'll be fucking dead. And he looks genuinely upset as he says, oh, wonderful, she's leaving. You're scaring away the spirits, mother. Get a real job, you useless bastard. This job pays for your fucking gambling problem, you ungrateful old bag. And he finally gets up and he yanks it off and chucks it out and slams the door, and she's out there going, I knew it. And I love Jerry smirking as he watches this whole thing. But he has some of the message, and he says, it's something about water, something about underwater, a box, a red box. And then he just leans forward and says, oh, and I'm spent. And it really is an incredibly poor performance at that point. The leaning forward onto the table, like, it's just so goofy. But I still kind of was like, I don't know, man. This is feeling a little bit legit. So Jerry is just like, yeah, all right, we're going to bail. And he takes all of the cookies off of the plate that they were offered. It's just a lovely moment of pettiness from him that I personally appreciate and would like to be able to, in the future, do something just as like, you know what? Fine. You bested me on this, but I am going to do this one little thing. So back at the house, the girls are getting themselves freaked out and finally gather up in this bed. At one point, Aaron says we have to be constantly on guard and vigilant. It's the only way we're going to make it. And then we cut to them in the morning, and it's like all of them have completely passed out in this bed, and it's daylight. Storm is over, and they're looking around, and Erin is downstairs by herself, and James comes in. And we have this scene that I really don't know how we feel about. So James basically tells her, look, something happened by, like, me seeing this tunnel. And at first she doesn't even remember what he's talking about. Then he starts saying about how, like, you do things, you suddenly want to do things that you've been meaning to your whole life. And she brings up hot air balloons. And he's like, oh, I did look into that actually. And it was, like, crazy expensive, which it is. I don't know if any of you have looked, but there's a whole thing in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend about a date that has to be like under $100, and somebody takes her on a fucking hot air balloon. And I was like, that is such bullshit. Like, there's no way you're finding a hot air balloon ride for under $100. It's just not happening. It's going to be $500 minimum. So anyway, he finally says, I like you, Aaron. And I don't expect you to say anything, but I have liked you for a long time. And I just wanted to tell you that I think you're beautiful. And he turns around and starts to walk away, and she grabs him and she kisses him. And I was genuinely surprised because I wasn't sure how she was going to take this. You know, I really didn't know. Like, it's one thing to be constantly ragging on somebody we know that they like the way the last season ended. It's been established that there's an affection, but that's different. You know, it's not necessarily a romantic thing. It's still not clear to me how much she feels it and how much is just her reacting to a boy telling her that he likes her, which is like certainly going to be a thing in the moment that would make you want to kiss somebody, even if later you're sort of like, I don't know about this. And I love we get Sixpence None the Richer singing here, Kiss Me. And I was like, oh my God, this song really takes me back. And then all of a sudden, here's Michelle, and she calls it incest, and James has to explain, like, that's absolutely not it. And then she says, but this is fucked, because if you get together, you'll break up. And then where does that leave me, Aaron? You might be my best friend, but he's my cousin, and dickhead or not, I'll have to stick with him. Don't put me in that position. And Orla comes in. Michelle asks Michelle what's going on, and Michelle says nothing. So Orla and Claire are not aware of what happened here, which is interesting to me. They don't talk about it ever. And I appreciated that when Michelle says, don't put me in this position, both Aaron and James kind of stop and are like, shit. Like they seem to really get that she's made a point. And this is not an unreasonable way to feel. Like, truly, the dangers of dating within your friend pool, everybody talks about it as something that's like destined to rip apart groups of friendships for a very good reason, because it tends to. It really does, unless you're super lucky and you and this person wind up staying together forever and it's like a really perfect match. Most of the time, the fractures that develop from a split wind up spreading and breaking the entire group into different parts that have to stick together. So I'm not really I'm not mad at this. So anyway, this is when Orla looks out the window and sees this guy, Robert, with a hammer coming at the house. And he's watching them peering out the window. And of course, as we know now, he just sees a bunch of fucking kids squatting in his house. But they think that this dude is dead. And they all get their their forms of self-defense. Aaron gets a giant sheet tray. I think Michelle has like a candlestick or a lamp. Claire has a spoon. I think James has oven cleaner. And Orla just has a cardboard box, which one would really think would not be useful, but turns out to be low-key the best thing out of all of them. And she puts it on her head and stands still, and it stays on her head. And I'm certain that there is somebody just out of frame holding it in place, but it looks totally crazy. It's such a weird moment when I noticed her standing there with the box just standing still. So this guy breaks through the fucking door with the hammer, which I was kind of later. Doesn't he just have a key? Like, why did he break in this way? I guess maybe his wife has I don't know. But we cut from there to Sister Michael, who is driving toward the house. She has this fucking car with the suicide doors and stops at the same house that we had stopped at earlier for directions. And I love this conversation. This one guy says something about how he's sorry for the loss of her aunt. And she's like, yes, well, she's at peace now. And then he says something else, and she says, well, yeah, she was an asshole at that. True enough. And then, are you keeping yourself, Sheila? And she comes up pointing again. For the love of God, Sheila, you did not see the devil that night. Well, you may have, but only because you were absolutely flying on the cocamadol. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to assume it's something like Robitussin or Oxycontin or, like some drug that was probably for a real affliction, and she just went a little bit too far with. And this lady looks kind of guilty and like puts her hand down as if to be like, well, you may have a point. So this dude, when we go back to the house, is about to attack all of them. And they drop the cardboard box over his head. And they're still thinking that he's a ghost and he's just about to disappear at any moment. But he's laying there being tackled by these children when Sister Michael walks in and is like, what in the fuck? And it turns out this is not her aunt's house. She only stopped here because she saw the school car outside. And the house that they were intending to clean is still sitting there in a state. And she is supposed to be hosting this wake there in like a few hours. So yeah, shit isn't great. And they all have to like let this guy go. And I love when she tells him, look, they're all born with this condition. They're all from Derry. And he says, oh, well, I suppose that is punishment enough. And they all agree with him. There's no defensiveness. There's no, like, he just immediately, yeah, all right. So they leave the house. The car is being towed, the one with the flat tire. And Erin pulls James aside and she says, look, I think Michelle's right. And he says, I mean, all right, I can wait. And there was a part of me that was like, that's a little bit presumptuous that you're saying I can wait. Like the issue isn't, you're assuming she's not just letting you down easy. You're assuming she's really saying, I would be with you if only it weren't for like our circumstances, which, I feel like that's a bit bold, but also I kind of appreciate that James has that confidence because he doesn't very often. So it was sort of sweet. And from the look on Erin's face, he wasn't wrong to take it that way because she seems pleased at his reaction. And then we get the last scene of the episode, which was so, so sweet. And we've got Joe going into the kitchen and he's about to fill a glass with water. And he fills the glass and looks at it, looks at the tap, sets the glass aside, and opens the cabinet under the sink and reaches back. And there is a red tin and it has his electric razor in it. And he gets like the biggest smile on his face. It's honestly such a touching moment. It's so sweet. And he says, thank you, love. Thank you. And it really got to me, you guys. It really did. Like, there are little moments like this in life. And if you try to explain to somebody else, it won't really sound like anything. But somebody was helping you out. You know that something happened, And I just really loved this moment. I thought it was so beautifully done. And I liked that it's private, that he discovers this, but that the girls aren't there to like kind of freak out and sully the moment with like excitement and a sense of being more interested in going back to the psychic than thinking about what this means in the moment. It just being kind of between him and the spirit of his wife, I thought it was just very moving. I liked this. So, all right. So that's the end of the episode. I better wrap up, but the show is so good. I'm really enjoying it. All right. So is there only 8 episodes this season? Oh my God. There's only 5, 6, 7. What? There's only 7. Oh, we're more than halfway done. Ugh, I hate that so much. Boo. All right. Well, what can you do? Austin's a 7, but the last is extra long. Interesting. All right. Well, stay tuned, everybody, and I will see you soon with a new episode. In the new year, I think it shall be. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.